welcome to Michelle Reads Books. Today we are discussing the Jane Austen classic, Pride and Prejudice. So I will begin with a summary of the book and then express my own opinion. This story revolves around the Bennet family. The family consists of father, mother, and 5 daughters: Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. They discover that a single man of large fortune has recently moved into the neighborhood. His name is Mr. Bingley. The family is anxious to get to know him, thinking that maybe he will fall in love with one of the girls. They are able to meet him, his 2 sisters, Mrs. Hurst and Miss Bingley, and his good friend, Mr. Darcy, at a public assembly. Mr. Bingley is friendly and cheerful. Mrs. Hurst and Miss Bingley both think very highly of themselves. Mr. Darcy, however, is very standoffish and refuses to dance with anyone he didn't know before he came. Mr. Bingley shows early interest in Jane Bennet. Mr. Darcy has twice the money Mr. Bingley does, but he blatantly refuses to dance with Elizabeth, saying she is not handsome enough. Elizabeth overhears this and is offended by his reaction. Later, Mr. Darcy secretly starts to admire Elizabeth, citing her fine eyes. He asks her to dance at a different occasion, which Elizabeth refuses. Around this time, a militia comes to town for the winter, and especially Kitty and Lydia are very focused on the officers. The Bennets receive a visit from their cousin, Mr. Collins, who was recently ordained a clergyman. He will one day inherit the Bennet home, and so decides to marry one of the daughters. He speaks very highly of his patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and takes an early interest in Jane. However, Mrs. Bennet explains that Jane will probably be very soon engaged, so he then switches his interest to Elizabeth. Elizabeth finds him ridiculous. Around this time, the family meets Mr. George Wickham, who is part of the militia. He is very good-looking and tells Elizabeth in confidence that Mr. Darcy refused him a job promised him. Elizabeth is then even more prejudiced against Mr. Darcy than before, and she begins to like Mr. Wickham. Then comes a ball at Mr. Bingley's house. Several things happen at this ball. Elizabeth dances with Mr. Darcy for the first time. There are several loud hints that Jane and Mr. Bingley will be engaged soon. Mr. Collins dances with Elizabeth, and Mary makes herself ridiculous in front of the crowd. After the ball, Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth, who flatly refuses him. Her mother is angry about it, but her father supports her decision. Mr. Collins then spends some time with Elizabeth's best friend and neighbor, Charlotte Lucas. He then proposes to Charlotte, who accepts his proposal. Mr. Bingley and his friend and sisters all leave for London with no fixed date for returning. In the spring, Jane visits their aunt and uncle in London in the hopes of seeing Mr. Bingley, and Elizabeth visits Charlotte and Mr. Collins with Charlotte's sister Maria. They meet Lady Catherine at her home, and Mr. Darcy, Lady Catherine's nephew, comes to visit, along with his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam. Colonel Fitzwilliam reveals to Elizabeth that Mr. Darcy has actively tried to prevent Mr. Bingley's relationship with her sister Jane. Then Mr. Darcy proposes, out of the blue, to Elizabeth. She angrily rejects him, citing his behavior to Jane and Mr. Bingley, as well as his treatment of Mr. Wickham. He explains that it wasn't about money or relatives, it was about the family's bad behavior. He writes a detailed letter explaining his side of the situation with Mr. Wickham, revealing that Mr. Wickham had agreed to not take the job, receiving money instead. Mr. Wickham had also tried to convince Mr. Darcy's 15-year-old sister Georgiana to marry him. He also explains that he separated Jane from Mr. Bingley because he didn't feel that her feelings were deep enough to marry his friend. Elizabeth has to acknowledge that while she disagrees with Mr. Darcy about Jane, she concedes all his other points. With more information about Mr. Wickham, she is much more distant than before. The militia then leaves the area, taking Mr. Wickham with them. Lydia is then invited to follow the militia to Brighton with her friend Mrs. Forster. Despite Elizabeth's warnings not to let her go, her father insists there is no danger to 15-year-old Lydia in going to Brighton with a friend. Jane also returns from London without ever having seen Mr. Bingley. Elizabeth then leaves on a planned vacation to Derbyshire with her uncle and aunt and the Gardiners. While in Derbyshire, the group decides to visit Pemberley, Mr. Darcy's home, as it is quite large and able to be toured. Elizabeth only agrees when she learns the family is not home. Mr. Darcy returns unexpectedly, while Elizabeth and the Gardiners are still there. He is very kind and gracious to them, and Elizabeth is surprised by his changed behavior. Mr. Darcy asks to introduce his sister Georgiana to Elizabeth. The two women get along well, and Elizabeth begins to have feelings for Mr. Darcy. One morning, while Elizabeth is reading 2 letters from Jane, Mr. Darcy happens to come in. He learns that Elizabeth's sister Lydia has run away from the Forsters in Brighton in order to marry Mr. Wickham. They have run away together and have not been traced farther than London. Jane writes to beg the Gardiners' help. Mr. Darcy leaves suddenly, and Elizabeth and the Gardiners leave shortly thereafter. Back at home, the family is trying to weather the crisis. All are worried about Lydia, but find her behavior appalling. They eventually get a letter from Mr. Gardiner explaining that Lydia and Mr. Wickham have been found. There was some discussion of financial settlements, but the wedding was arranged. Mr. Bennet is convinced that Mr. Gardiner must have spent a lot of money on Lydia in order to get Mr. Wickham to marry her. When the newly married couple visit the Bennets, Lydia reveals that Mr. Darcy was at her wedding. Elizabeth writes to Mrs. Gardiner to get all the details and learns that all the financial settlements were arranged by Mr. Darcy. Also, that he found Mr. Wickham himself. Mrs. Gardiner believes that Mr. Darcy intends to marry Elizabeth, and that was why he did it. Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy come back to the neighborhood. After a few weeks, Mr. Bingley proposes to Jane. The whole family is happy for her. A week later, the family receives an unexpected visit from Lady Catherine de Bourgh. She comes to tell Elizabeth that she doesn't approve of her marrying Mr. Darcy, and reveals that Mr. Darcy is engaged to her daughter Anne. Elizabeth answers ambiguously in general and refuses to play into Lady Catherine's demands. She eventually reveals that she is not engaged to Mr. Darcy, but refuses to promise to never enter an engagement. Lady Catherine leaves angrily. They eventually find out that Lady Catherine thought they were engaged because someone had said Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy would be spending more time together since their sister and best friend were getting married. Mr. Collins took that to mean that they were getting married. Mr. Darcy then returns to the neighborhood and proposes to Elizabeth again because he had learned to hope by Lady Catherine, since Elizabeth had refused to promise never to become engaged to him. This time, Elizabeth accepts and thanks him for his part in Lydia's marriage. There is some drama, as no one saw this coming, since Elizabeth hadn't shared her changed feelings about him, but the two couples marry very happily and spend a lot of time together. Eventually, Kitty spends more time with Elizabeth, improving her attitude, and Mary spends more time alone with their mother, encouraging her to be more outgoing. Wow. So, how do I feel about this book? I think this is one of those classics that absolutely lives up to its name. This is a very lovely story. It's really well thought out. The only thing I really have against it is that it has so many characters that unless you've heard the story 3 or 4 times, you'll get them mixed up. And they just throw in more and more characters. When they go to visit Lady Catherine de Bourgh, then they throw in not only her daughter Anne, but also their carer for the daughter, and they also mention by name some of the neighbors and things like that. That's too much information. We can't really retain it all. And yeah, I just feel like there's kind of too many characters. I think if they could have cut out quite a few. In fact, for example, Mrs. Hurst is Mr. Bingley's sister's name, after his married sister's name. She can be cut out of the story completely without hurting it at all. Yeah. I know that a lot of the movie versions do cut her out. And there's several other characters that they cut out because they're just not important. They have little tiny things to do with it. And I know that that's more realistic because there are a lot of people in our lives and there's, a lot of people in the world. But when you're telling a story, it's not really necessary. I feel like there's just too many characters. That's the only thing I would say that is a little bit irritating. The characterizations of the characters are very, very dynamic, very detailed. And I like how they change over time. Elizabeth at the beginning is very prejudiced against Mr. Darcy, and then she realizes that she was wrong. but she has trouble owning up to it. She has trouble admitting that she was wrong. And I think that's a very human thing to do, is be like, oh, how do I tell people I was wrong? She was wrong about Mr. Wickham and she was wrong about Mr. Darcy. And she has to reveal this to her sister, for example. She tells Jane all about it, but it's very hard for her to admit. And I think that a lot of people would feel that way as well. And then there are other people like Mr. Darcy, who is a little bit frustrating. I know that there's speculation that he was autistic, and as an autistic person, I can say that I'm not this bad. Yeah, like not dancing with anybody you didn't know personally already at the first dance, I'll give him that one for a relatively reasonable reaction as an autistic person. But like once he gets to know other people, I don't see any reason why he would refuse to be sociable. Like at least make an effort, you know? Like I at least try if I'm out and about in company with people. But yeah, like but even him, the way he refuses to dance with Elizabeth immediately, he's getting pressure from his friend, please dance with people. If he had been very uncomfortable, he could have just said, actually, I'm really not feeling up to it tonight, like maybe another time. Even when he's like, hey, what about Elizabeth? You could dance with her. And then he's like, I really don't feel up to dancing, instead of being like, she's not pretty enough. You know, it's a very rude reaction. And I think anybody would know that, including autistic people. Thank you. And so I don't give him a pass for that. His behavior at the beginning of the book is not good. It's not good. And he does acknowledge that later. And he also admits that he liked Elizabeth initially because she didn't like him. It got his attention because most people kind of pandered to him and catered to all of his whims and whatever because he's so rich. But she didn't. And because she didn't, it caught his attention. And I don't like that either. Like, I only like people who don't like me, you know? I don't know. It's a bit problematic, I'm not gonna lie. But I understand how, like, it developed over time and how he did kind of repent in that sense and changed his ways and was very kind to her when she was visiting his home. And he was very comfortable there because that's where he grew up. Yeah, and his behavior there just was a 180 from the rest of his behavior. Once again, reflecting a bit autism, things. But like, I don't know. Like, I don't think that Elizabeth is particularly like overly outgoing. She's not really extroverted, I would say, but she deals with it. Yeah. And yet I just feel like Mr. Darcy could deal with it, and he doesn't, because he doesn't want to. And that's kind of the only thing I really would say, like, that gets on my nerves. I also feel like there's a lot of sexism, but it is a reflection of the times. Like, Mr. Collins's language is awful. And I will respect Charlotte Lucas's decision to marry him, but it does come out of the blue when you're reading it. You're like, wait, what? Yeah. It's like, okay, I guess. That's what you want. But it's also a reflection of the life that you had to lead at that time. And I feel like in a modern age, Charlotte would have stayed single for probably the rest of her life, just because she didn't seem like somebody who really had a lot of interest in marrying. She just wanted a comfortable home. And today women can have that on their own. They don't have to get married in order to get it. And so, there's a lot of ways where you look at this story and you realize that there's a few problematic areas compared with our standards of today. But at the same time, compared to the standards of the time, Elizabeth was one of the most strong-willed characters that is also very endearing, that is in any kind of story, where Lydia is strong-willed without being endearing. And you get very frustrated with her behavior as well. So it is a very, very lovely story. Great characterizations, very dynamic characters, and it really keeps you invested in what will happen to all of the characters. But I just feel like there's too many characters, plus the sexism is a little bit difficult to swallow. So yeah, that's my opinion. Oh, this book is also about just over 10 hours is how long it took me to read it. So anyway, leave your opinions in the comments below and happy reading.